Hello, my name is John for Through the Eyes of George, and today we're going to talk about the passing away or falling asleep of people that we know or that we look up to. And we'll look at the series of events that happened with George Washington's passing and some practical things that we can do in our culture today. And don't forget to check out my website, potus1.com, P-O-T-U-S, the number 1.com. All of my sources for this video will be in the description below. And it is a very sensitive topic when someone that we know or love passes away. And what do we do? How do we handle those things? And those are some things that we will be talking about later in this video. So George Washington, on December 12th, went out for a ride to survey and take care of his property, to take care of the business of his land there. And it was snowing and it was raining, and he had guests at his home, and he came back, and George did not change his clothes right away. And in doing so, later that evening, he had dinner, he read the newspaper, he entertained his guests, and then eventually he went to bed. But through that, at some point, he had a sore throat. And later in the evening, in the middle of the night, he woke up Martha and was complaining about the soreness of his throat getting worse. I guess you could say some biographers have said the hoarseness, very rough. So then Martha wanted to call a doctor and wanted George to take some medicine or something like that, and George said no. Let's just wait till the morning. Wait till dawn. And it was still very cold outside, and so in the morning it got worse. And then Martha and George, they called, or well, not called, they sent for one of the doctors. One of his trusted friends, Dr. Craik, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, C-R-A-I-K. From Alexandria. That was pretty far away, but in the meantime, they had Dr. Gustav Brown come, and then also Dr. Elijah Dick come. So 3 doctors: Dr. Brown, Dr. Dick, and Dr. Creek. And so they were all there, and at some point, through the process of the swelling of his throat, because it's I guess you could say acute tonsillitis, or the inflammation of his tonsils, and what they said, what those 3 doctors agreed to, that what was happening to George Washington is that it was quinsy, Q-U-I-N-S-Y, quinsy. So basically tightening or swelling of the windpipe, and slowly, I guess you could say, the windpipe got smaller and smaller and smaller, so he couldn't breathe, kind of like suffocation. Pretty terrible way to go. Any way to go, to pass away, is terrible. You don't want to see your loved ones that you know or people you look up to pass away. It's very sad. But so George Washington, that happened, and in the process of that, with the medical knowledge at the time, the doctors took 5 liters of blood from him through bloodletting, thinking that would help in some kind of way. And you can look up that on your own, and what the 18th century doctors thought of that. And then also they had a concoction of molasses, vinegar, and butter to soothe his throat. And in attempting to drink that, George Washington almost suffocated himself because of what that was and in his deteriorating condition. And his beloved, beautiful wife, Martha, was there the whole time. One of his most trusted companions was there. Tobias Lear, Lear, and he has a beautiful account of the things that happened to George Washington in his diary, Tobias Lear. And in George Washington's diary, the last things that he wrote was about the weather. So then George Washington, in the process of all this going on, knowing that he is about to go or to pass away, he asks his beloved wife to get his 2 wills that he has. He tears up one, and not tears one up, but what do I mean? He asks Martha to burn one. That's what I meant to say. To burn one and keep the other. The one that George Washington kept, that he asked his wife to keep, was the one that freed his slaves. And some of his slaves, some of them that were actually there at his bedside, Molly and Charlotte and Caroline, and then also Christopher Shields, Sheels. Those 4 servants or slaves were part of a dowry that was, they were owned by a different estate, you could say. So when George Washington freed his slaves, it was only a portion because of Virginia law. And George Washington in his will, wanted to free all of his slaves, but he couldn't because of Virginia law. So, and then also, like I said, the 3 doctors were there. Martha was there, Tobias Lear was there, and those 4 servants were there. And his Dr. Craik, when he was talking to George Washington about, how are you, and all that kind of stuff, George Washington said that to Dr. Craik that I die hard, but I am not afraid to go. Later, he was talking to someone in the room, and he said, "'Tis well." "'Tis well" was George Washington's last words. And after George Washington passed away, in his will, he was afraid. He had this interesting fear of being buried alive. So he asked in his will about to not be buried until 3 days after he passed away. And Tobias Lear made sure of that happened. So 4 days after he passed away, they buried him. Also, one of the most famous eulogies by George Washington was by one of George Washington's, bar none, most trusted, soldiers on the battlefield, Light Horse Harry Lee. Light Horse Harry Lee is the father of Robert E. Lee, one of the generals during the Civil War. Now, whatever you have to say about that, it's just the facts. It's just the facts. And one of Robert E. Lee's children were named after George Washington. Now, you can think of that as you will, but that's just the facts. So after, what am I trying to say? 2 months after, for the next 2 months, you should say, for the next 2 months, around 450 eulogies were spread across or sent across the United States. That's what I was going to say. Light Horse Harry Lee wrote those famous words in a eulogy, first in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of his countrymen. That was Light Horse Harry Lee. And so yeah, George Washington is definitely looked up to, through all the good, the bad, and the indifferent. And he was a great model of for a father. He was a stepfather, for a husband, for a leader, and he knew that he had a change of heart on many, I guess you could say, cultural things, like with slavery, on entrepreneurship, and all kinds of different current topics of the time that are still pretty prevalent today. And some practical things. If you are a Christian, or if you believe in God, where do you take your mind in that? As a Christian, depending on what you believe in Christianity, the hope. It's the hope. And that's what we take our mind to, the return of Jesus Christ. And if you have believe in something different, or you just have a moral compass, a good moral compass, as George Washington said many times about having good, knowing the difference between right and wrong, and focusing your mind on things. But as a Christian, because George Washington was an Anglican Christian, and he used the King James Bible, some verses that I thought of that a person could go to if they are a Christian is 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 18, 1 Corinthians 15, verse 3, and then verses 12 through 19, Psalms 6, verse 5, Ecclesiastes 9, verse 10, Psalms 1:16, verse 15, John 10:10, and Hebrews 2:14. Just some verses about the hope and the passing away of loved ones, some practical things that we can think about in today's culture. Thank you for watching this video. Again, I'll put all of my sources in the description below. And thank you very much for watching this video. I love you all, and have a fantastic rest of the day.